Margaret and I met in 1987 at a charity auction in downtown Toronto. The conference room smelled like expensive cologne and decades of accumulated pride. I was 63 years old, sitting at the far end of a mahogany table that probably cost more than most people's cars. Around me sat men in suits that whispered money with every thread. My own jacket was 12 years old, bought during a Boxing Day sale at a discount store, but it was clean and pressed. I'd learned long ago that dignity had nothing to do with price tags. Across from me sat Gerald Whitmore, my father-in-law. At 74, he still carried himself like the titan of industry he'd spent 5 decades building himself into. Silver hair swept back, Italian leather shoes, a watch that cost more than the average Canadian's yearly salary. He'd built Whitmore Industries from a single manufacturing plant into a corporate empire worth over $2 billion. Pulp and paper, primarily, but he'd diversified into real estate and technology over the years. Next to him sat his son, Bradley, 44 years old, everything handed to him on a silver platter since birth. He'd never worked a day outside the family business, never had to prove himself in the real world. Bradley wore his entitlement like a second skin. Margaret sat beside me, her hand occasionally brushing mine under the table. My wife of 39 years. She'd turned 60 just last month, still beautiful, still the same woman who'd smiled at me across a crowded room all those decades ago when I was a nobody trying to make something of myself. Our daughter, Emma, sat next to her mother. At 36, she had Margaret's eyes and, thankfully, my work ethic. She worked as a nurse at Mount Sinai, drove a 7-year-old Honda Civic, lived in a modest condo in North York. She'd never asked us for money beyond what was reasonable, never expected handouts. Gerald cleared his throat. Now that we're all here, I want to discuss the future of Whitmore Industries. I'd known this was coming. The dinner invitation had been unusually formal, even for Gerald. Family meeting, he'd called it. Margaret had been nervous all week, wondering what her father wanted to announce. As you all know, I'm not getting any younger, Gerald continued. The words seemed to physically pain him. Men like Gerald never liked acknowledging mortality. It's time to think about succession planning. Bradley leaned forward, barely containing his excitement. He'd been waiting for this moment his entire life. I've made my decision, Gerald said. Bradley will take over as CEO when I step down next spring. Margaret squeezed my hand. She'd expected this, of course. Gerald had always favored his son over his daughter, had never bothered to hide it. In his generation, in his world, companies passed from father to son. Daughters married and became someone else's responsibility. That's wonderful, Dad, Margaret said, her voice steady despite the hurt I could hear beneath it. She'd spent 20 years working in the company's human resources department before Emma was born, had helped implement policies that improved worker satisfaction and retention. Gerald had barely acknowledged her contributions. There's more, Gerald said. He turned to me for the first time that evening. Thomas, you've been family for a long time now. I nodded. 39 years of being tolerated, more accurately. Gerald had never approved of me. I'd been 24 when I met Margaret, working as a machine operator at one of his plants. She'd been doing her practicum there, studying business administration at York University. I'd helped her when she got lost, trying to find the plant manager's office. 3 days later, I asked her to coffee. 6 months after that, I asked her to marry me. Gerald had tried to talk her out of it. I wasn't good enough, he'd said. Didn't have prospects. Would hold her back. But Margaret had stood firm. We'd married at City Hall, with 2 witnesses we'd pulled in from the street. It had been the happiest day of my life. I know things have been difficult financially for you two, Gerald continued. His tone suggested he was doing me an enormous favor. That little house in Scarborough, Margaret having to work part-time at the library. Emma living in that tiny apartment. The house was 1,600 square feet, perfectly adequate for 2 people. Margaret worked at the library because she loved books, not because we needed the money. But I said nothing. I want to help, Gerald said. Bradley's going to need a strong team. Good people he can trust. I'd like to offer you a position, Thomas. Facilities manager. $38,000 a year, benefits included. The number hung in the air. Facilities manager. A glorified janitor. At 63 years old, after a lifetime of work, my father-in-law was offering me a mop and bucket. Margaret's hand tightened on mine. I could feel her anger, her humiliation on my behalf. Bradley smirked. It's a great opportunity, Thomas. A lot of guys your age would kill for job security like that. I looked at Gerald, really looked at him. He genuinely believed he was being generous. In his mind, he was throwing a bone to his son-in-law, the factory worker who'd somehow managed to keep his daughter happy all these years, despite having nothing to offer her. That's quite an offer, I said quietly. You'd start in January, Gerald continued. Give you time to wrap up whatever you're doing now. He didn't even know I'd retired 3 years ago. Didn't care enough to ask about my life. Bradley will want to make some changes, streamline operations. Fresh eyes, fresh approach. Dad, maybe we should discuss this more, Margaret started. It's settled, Gerald interrupted. I think Thomas will agree it's more than fair. I pulled out my phone. Excuse me a moment, I need to make a call. Now? Gerald frowned. We're in the middle of a family discussion. It's important, won't take long. I stepped away from the table, walked to the window overlooking downtown Toronto. The city lights spread out below. Millions of lives, millions of stories. I dialed Robert Chen, my attorney. He answered on the second ring. Robert, it's Thomas. Remember what we discussed last month? I need you to send that email. Tonight. You're sure? Robert asked. We'd known each other for 35 years. He understood what this meant. I'm sure. Give me 20 minutes. I returned to the table. Gerald was explaining his vision for the company's future. Bradley was nodding along like a bobblehead. Margaret looked miserable. Everything all right? She asked quietly. Everything's fine, I said. I meant it. Gerald wrapped up his monologue. So, Thomas, what do you say? Ready to join the Whitmore Industries team officially? I appreciate the thought, Gerald. But I'll have to decline. His eyebrows rose. Decline? I'm quite comfortable in retirement. But thank you for thinking of me. Bradley laughed. Retirement? Come on, Thomas. You can't retire on whatever you've managed to save. Be realistic. Bradley, Margaret said sharply. I'm just saying. Mom, Dad's offering him a real opportunity here. Stable income, benefits. At his age, what else is he going to do? Gerald held up a hand. Thomas, I understand pride, but think about Margaret. Think about Emma. This is about providing for your family. My phone buzzed. A text from Robert. Sent. Actually, Gerald, there's something I should probably mention. I kept my voice casual. About providing for my family. Oh? He looked amused. You remember back in 1985, when Whitmore Industries almost went under? The amusement vanished. Gerald's face went hard. That had been the worst year of his life. The year he'd almost lost everything. A combination of bad investments, market downturn, and a competitor trying to acquire him at a bargain price. That was 40 years ago, Gerald said curtly. 39, I corrected. You needed $12 million to stay afloat. Banks wouldn't touch you. You were days from bankruptcy. I found investors, Gerald said. Private capital. Saved the company. You did, I agreed. Those investors took 49% equity in exchange for the capital injection. You kept 51%, maintained control. What's your point? One of those investors put up $5 million. Took 21% equity. Made him the second largest shareholder after you. Gerald stared at me. I could see his mind working, trying to figure out where I was going with this. That investor's name was Michael Brennan, I continued. A friend of mine. We grew up together in Scarborough, both worked factory jobs. But Mike had a gift for saving, for investing. He'd built up a nice portfolio by the mid-'80s. I remember Brennan, Gerald said slowly. Died about 15 years ago. 12 years ago, I said. Cancer. He and I stayed close all those years. Used to have coffee every Sunday morning, talk about life, business, family. Bradley shifted impatiently. What does this have to do with anything? Mike never married, never had kids. When he died, he left everything to his closest friend, put it in trust, had it managed by the same firm that had been handling his investments for decades. Margaret was looking at me now, really looking. I could see the question forming in her eyes. His closest friend was you, Gerald said. It wasn't a question anymore. That's right, 21% of Whitmore Industries. Mike's shares became mine when he died. The silence that followed was profound. But you've been. Margaret started, then stopped. She was piecing it together. The modest house, the old cars, my simple lifestyle. You knew, Gerald's voice was strangled. You've known you were a major shareholder for 12 years and you never said anything? You never asked, I said simply. You never cared enough about me to ask anything about my life. Bradley had gone pale. This is ridiculous. You're lying. My phone buzzed again. Your attorney should have just received an email from my attorney, I told Gerald. Documentation of the share transfer, voting records, everything. I've been voting by proxy all these years, usually in favor of your proposals. No reason to rock the boat. Gerald pulled out his phone with shaking hands. I watched his face as he read Robert's email. Watched the color drain, then return in a furious red flush. 21%, he whispered. The company's current valuation is approximately $2.1 billion, I said. That makes my holdings worth about $440 million, give or take. Emma made a small sound. Margaret had gone completely still. Over the years, those shares have paid dividends, I continued. Mike was smart about it. Set up the trust, so the money was reinvested, diversified. Real estate in Toronto and Vancouver. Index funds. Some tech stocks that did quite well. The portfolio's grown considerably. How much? Gerald's voice was barely audible. Last statement put it around 620 million. Canadian dollars, of course. Bradley knocked over his water glass. No one moved to clean it up. But you live in Scarborough, Gerald said. He sounded dazed. You drive a Camry. A 2018 Camry, I corrected. Perfectly reliable car. And our house is paid off, comfortable, close to the library where Margaret volunteers. We like our life. Why? Margaret asked. Just that one word, but I could hear everything behind it. Why didn't you tell me? Why did we live like we struggled? Why did you let my father treat you like you were nothing? I turned to her, took both her hands. Do you remember what you said to me the day before we got married? She shook her head, tears forming. You said, I don't care if we're poor. I don't care if my father disowns me. I just want a life with you. A simple life, where we're happy. Do you remember? She nodded. I wanted to give you that. A life where money wasn't what mattered. Where we didn't have to worry about who wanted what from us, who was being genuine and who was chasing a fortune. Your father made it clear what he thought of me. If he'd known about Mike's shares, about the trust, do you think his attitude would have changed? Yes, she whispered, but not for the right reasons. He would have seen dollar signs, not me, just like everyone else would have. I looked around the table. Mike made me promise something before he died. He said, don't let the money change who you are. Live the life you want to live, not the life people expect from someone with money. So, that's what I did. We lived simply because we chose to, not because we had to. You lied to me, Margaret said, but there was no anger in her voice, just confusion. I kept a secret, I said. There's a difference. The trust paid for Emma's education. Did you know that? The scholarship she thought she got for nursing school? That was Mike's money. The down payment on her condo that her grandmother supposedly left her? Mike's money? The repairs on this house over the years that you thought I was paying for with my factory pension? Mike's money. Emma was crying now. Dad, I made sure you were both taken care of, I said. But I didn't want either of you to know you were rich. I wanted you to work, to appreciate what you earned, to understand the value of a dollar. And you did. Emma, you're one of the hardest working nurses at Mount Sinai. Margaret, you volunteer at the library 3 days a week, teaching newcomers to read. You're both incredible women who built your lives on your own merits, not on a bank balance. I turned back to Gerald. As for you, Gerald, you're right that it's time for succession planning. But you've been operating under a fundamental misunderstanding of how corporate governance works. His face was still red. What are you talking about? You can't just appoint Bradley as CEO, not without shareholder approval. You own 51%, which means you control the company. But major decisions require a board vote, and major shareholders have board seats. I've made my decision, Gerald said, but there was uncertainty in his voice now. And I respect that. But here's the thing, Gerald. I own 21%. Your friend Marcus Rothstein, who you brought in as an investor in 1998, he owns 11%. And Marcus and I, we play golf every Thursday morning. Have for years. He's been telling me for a while now that he thinks Bradley isn't ready for the CEO position. Bradley's face had gone from pale to green. You've been conspiring behind our backs? I've been playing golf, I said mildly. We talk. Marcus has concerns about Bradley's experience level, his tendency to fire competent people who disagree with him, his 3-hour liquid lunches. That's slander, Bradley said weakly. It's observation. Marcus has been on the board for 24 years. He pays attention. I looked at Gerald. With my 21% and Marcus's 11%, that's 32%. We can't outvote you, but we can make your life very difficult. Block major initiatives. Call for special votes. Raise concerns with other minority shareholders. What do you want? Gerald asked. He'd aged a decade in the last 10 minutes. I want what's best for the company, I said. Whitmore Industries employs 4,300 people across Canada. Those people depend on the company being well run. They deserve leadership that's earned, not inherited. And you think you should be CEO? There was venom in Gerald's voice now. God, no, I laughed. I'm 63 and retired. I have no desire to run a company, but I think Emma should be considered. Every head turned to our daughter. She looked terrified. Emma? Gerald said. She's a nurse. She has an MBA from Schulich, I said. Did you know that? She got it part-time over 6 years while working full-time at the hospital. She's been studying business leadership, organizational behavior, change management. She did her thesis on sustainable corporate governance in family-owned businesses. Margaret was staring at Emma. You never told me. I didn't want anyone to know, Emma said quietly. I didn't want Grandpa to think I was angling for something. I wanted to learn, to be prepared, just in case. I smiled at my daughter. She's been preparing for years, not because she expected anything, but because she wanted to be ready if opportunity ever came. That's the kind of leader Whitmore Industries needs. She has no experience in the industry, Bradley protested. Neither did you when Gerald handed you a VP position at 25, I said. At least Emma has been working in the real world, managing teams, dealing with budgets and regulations and difficult people. She knows what it's like to work for a living. Gerald sat back in his chair. I could see him calculating, trying to find a way out, but the math was simple. He could force Bradley into the CEO position, but I could make it messy, very messy. Bad publicity, board battles, potential lawsuits from minority shareholders claiming breach of fiduciary duty. This is blackmail, Gerald said. This is corporate governance, I corrected. I'm simply exercising my rights as a major shareholder. I've been a silent partner for 39 years, Gerald. Let you run the company however you wanted. Voted with you on every major decision. But I won't be silent about this. Bradley isn't ready, and deep down, you know it. The silence stretched out. Margaret was still holding my hands. Emma looked like she might faint. Finally, Gerald spoke. I need time to think. Of course, I said. Take all the time you need. But understand this. I'm not trying to hurt you or the company. I'm trying to help. Mike believed in Whitmore Industries. That's why he invested when no one else would. I believe in it too. I want to see it thrive for another 40 years. But that requires the right leadership. We left shortly after that. The drive home was silent. Margaret sat beside me, staring out the window at the passing streetlights. Emma followed in her Honda, probably still in shock. At home, Margaret finally spoke. $600 million. Give or take. For 39 years, you let me think we were scraping by. We were never scraping by, I said gently. We lived within our means. We had everything we needed. But I worked at the library for minimum wage. Because you loved it. Would you have loved it more if you knew you didn't need the money? She was quiet for a long moment. No, she finally admitted. I probably would have felt guilty. Exactly. I wanted you to do what you loved because you loved it, not because of what it paid. Same with Emma. She became a nurse because she wanted to help people, not because it was a lucrative career. If she'd known about the money, would she have made the same choice? Probably not, Margaret said softly. She looked at me. You could have told me. I would have understood. I know. But I also know your father. The minute he found out, he would have changed. He would have been in our lives constantly, wanting input, wanting influence. And you would have been torn between your father and me. I didn't want to put you in that position. So you let him treat you like garbage for almost 40 years. He didn't treat me like garbage, I said. He treated me like he treats everyone he considers beneath him, which, admittedly, is almost everyone. But his opinion of me never mattered, Margaret. Yours did. Emma's did. And you both loved me for who I was. not what I had. Emma came in then, her eyes red from crying. Dad, I don't know what to say. You don't have to say anything, sweetheart. But you basically just made me a candidate for CEO of a $2 billion company. I'm a nurse. I work in emergency care. I deal with heart attacks and broken bones, not quarterly earnings and board meetings. You deal with high-pressure situations every day, I said. You make life or death decisions. You manage teams under stress. You communicate with people from all walks of life. Those are exactly the skills a good CEO needs. But I don't know anything about pulp and paper. You can learn. And you'd have advisors, department heads, people who've been in the industry for decades. The CEO's job isn't to know everything. It's to make good decisions, to listen to smart people, to lead with integrity. Can you do that? She was quiet for a moment. I think so. Maybe. I don't know. That uncertainty is a good sign, I said. It means you understand the weight of the responsibility. Bradley would have said yes, without hesitation, because he thinks he already knows everything. Margaret made tea, something she always did when she needed to process. We sat at our kitchen table, the same one we'd bought 37 years ago at an estate sale, and talked until after midnight. What happens now? Margaret asked. Gerald will call a board meeting, I said. He'll probably try to find a compromise. Maybe offer Bradley COO, make someone else CEO temporarily, with Bradley as heir apparent. Will you accept that? Depends on who the temporary CEO is and how temporary we're talking. If it's a legitimate succession plan with clear metrics and timelines, maybe. If it's just a way to delay until Gerald can consolidate support to force Bradley through anyway, then no. You've really thought this through. I've had 12 years to think about it, I said, ever since Mike died and left me those shares. I knew someday there'd be a reckoning. I just didn't know when. Why now? Emma asked. Why tonight? Because Gerald forced my hand. He was going to announce Bradley as his successor, present it as a done deal. Once that announcement went public, it would be much harder to walk back. The company would have a perception problem, questions about leadership stability. I had to act before he made it official. The next morning, my phone started ringing at 7 a.m. Gerald. I let it go to voicemail. He called 3 more times before finally leaving a message. His voice was tight, controlled. We need to talk. My office. 10 a.m. I called Robert instead. I might need you at a meeting this morning. I'm already on my way to your house, he said. We should prepare. Robert arrived at 8:30. We spent an hour going over scenarios, options, potential compromises. By the time we headed downtown to Gerald's office, I felt ready. The Whitmore Industries headquarters occupied 15 floors of a glass tower in the financial district. I'd been here maybe half a dozen times in 39 years, always for obligatory family events, Christmas parties, retirement celebrations, that sort of thing. I'd always been the son-in-law standing awkwardly in the corner, tolerated but not welcomed. Today was different. The receptionist did a double take when I gave my name. Mr. Sullivan? Of course. Mr. Whitmore is expecting you. Top floor. The top floor. Gerald's private domain. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Lake Ontario. Original art on the walls. Furniture that whispered old money. Gerald was waiting in his office. So was Bradley. And Marcus Rothstein. Marcus stood when I entered, genuine warmth on his face. Thomas. Been too long since our last golf game. Thursday morning? I said. Same time? Wouldn't miss it. He shook Robert's hand. Robert Chen, good to see you. You keeping this one out of trouble? As much as possible, Robert said with a slight smile. Gerald didn't stand. Sit down. Let's get this over with. We sat. Bradley glared at me from across the conference table like I'd personally betrayed him. Perhaps in his mind, I had. I've reviewed the documentation your attorney sent, Gerald began. Everything appears to be in order. You do indeed own 21% of Whitmore Industries. I never claimed otherwise. For 12 years, you said nothing. For 12 years, you attended family dinners, sat in my home, and never mentioned that you were one of my largest shareholders. For 39 years, you never asked me about my life. I countered. You never wondered how I was supporting my family, what I did with my time, whether I had interests or investments beyond the factory job you assumed was my entire existence. Gerald's jaw tightened. You deceived us. I kept my financial affairs private, I corrected. There's no law requiring me to disclose my assets to my in-laws. The shares were held in trust, managed by professionals, voted by proxy. Everything above board, everything legal. You could have found out any time if you'd bothered to review your shareholder registry. The point is, Robert interjected smoothly, my client has been a responsible, engaged shareholder for over a decade. He's supported Mr. Whitmore's leadership and vision. He's only speaking up now because he has serious concerns about the proposed succession plan. Concerns you encouraged, Bradley said to Marcus. Marcus shrugged. I've had concerns about your readiness for years, Bradley. Thomas and I simply agree on this point. Gerald held up a hand. I didn't call this meeting to rehash last night. I want to know what you want, Thomas. Name your price. I don't have a price. Everyone has a price. You want a board seat? Fine. More dividend distributions? We can discuss it. But I won't let you destroy my legacy by blocking my son from his rightful position. His rightful position, I repeated. Tell me, Gerald, what makes it rightful? The fact that he shares your DNA? That's not how corporations work in the 21st century. That's monarchy, not meritocracy. This is a family business. It's a publicly traded company with a family-controlled majority stake, Robert corrected. There's a difference. You have fiduciary duties to all shareholders, not just family members. Gerald turned to Marcus. You're really going to side with him over me? After everything? Marcus hit. Gerald, you're my friend. You've been my friend for 26 years, but I'm also a shareholder and a board member. I have responsibilities. Bradley isn't ready. Hell, he might never be ready. Some people aren't suited for leadership at that level. He's my son, and that's clouding your judgment, Marcus said gently. You're a brilliant businessman, Gerald. You built something incredible from almost nothing, but you're letting sentiment override logic. What do you suggest then? Gerald's voice was bitter. Just skip a generation? Hand it to some outsider? Why not, Emma? I said. We've been over this. She's a nurse. She's a nurse with an MBA. 2 decades of leadership experience, and no sense of entitlement, I said. She's worked her way up from the bottom in a different industry, which means she'll bring fresh perspective. She's young enough to lead for 25 years, old enough to have wisdom, and she's family, which apparently matters to you. She's a woman, Bradley said. Then, realizing how that sounded, I mean, the industry is very traditional. Old boys club. They won't respect her. Then perhaps it's time the industry evolved, I said. Besides, Emma deals with old boys clubs every day. You think hospital administration isn't dominated by male egos? She navigates it just fine. Gerald was silent for a long moment. Finally, he said, even if I were to consider Emma, which I'm not committing to, she has no experience in this company. She'd need to learn the business from the ground up. So start her in a junior role, Marcus suggested. VP of Operations, maybe. Let her work her way up over 5 years. See how she does. If she excels, great. If not, you develop other candidates. 5 years? Bradley exploded. You want me to wait 5 more years? You're 44, I said. If Emma doesn't work out, you'd be 49. Still plenty of time for a long tenure as CEO. And in the meantime, you could actually develop real leadership skills instead of coasting on your last name. Bradley turned to his father. Are you going to let him talk to me like this? He owns 21% of my company, Gerald said tiredly. He can talk however he wants. The meeting went on for another 2 hours, back and forth, proposals and counterproposals. Finally, we reached a compromise of sorts. Emma would be offered a position as VP of Strategic Planning. She'd spend 2 years learning the business, working with different departments, developing relationships with key stakeholders. At the end of 2 years, her performance would be reviewed. If she excelled, she'd be promoted to COO with a clear path to CEO in another 3 years. Bradley would become COO immediately, but with conditions. He'd have specific performance metrics to meet, executive coaching, regular reviews. If he couldn't demonstrate improved leadership skills and business acumen, he'd be moved to a different role. Essentially, you're making them compete, Gerald said. I'm giving them both opportunities to prove themselves, I corrected. May the best leader win. It wasn't perfect, but it was workable. Robert drafted the framework right there in the conference room. Gerald signed off grudgingly. Bradley signed looking like he'd swallowed poison. Marcus signed with evident relief. One more thing, I said as we were wrapping up. I want a board seat. Gerald's head snapped up. What? 21% stake. I should have been on the board years ago. Mike had a seat. When his shares transferred to me, so should his board position. You said you didn't want to be involved. I didn't say that. I said I didn't want to be CEO. But I do want a voice in major decisions. I've been silent too long. Gerald looked like he wanted to argue, but there was no legal ground to stand on. Major shareholders had board rights. Fine. The next board election is in 3 months. I'll be nominated, I confirmed. We shook hands, though Gerald's grip was cold. Bradley refused to shake at all, just stormed out. Marcus walked out with Robert and me. That was intense, Marcus said when we were in the elevator. But necessary. Gerald's been in denial about Bradley for years. Will this really change anything? I asked. Maybe. Maybe not. But at least now, there's a path forward that doesn't involve a spoiled brat driving a $2 billion company into the ground. Marcus checked his watch. I need to get to another meeting. But Thomas, I'm glad you finally spoke up. Mike would be proud. After Marcus left, Robert and I walked to a nearby coffee shop. Over espresso, he asked, how are you feeling? Honestly, exhausted and guilty. About what? Margaret, Emma. I dropped this on them with no warning. Emma now has this massive opportunity that she never asked for, and she's terrified. Margaret feels like I didn't trust her. Did you trust her? Of course. Then tell her that. Tell them both that this was never about trust. It was about protection. Robert finished his coffee. For what it's worth, I think you did the right thing. Not just today, but all these years. Mike wanted you to live authentically, and you did. You didn't let the money define you. That evening, I sat down with Margaret and Emma, really talked, for hours, about Mike, about the trust, about why I'd made the choices I made. I never wanted the money to come between us, I said. I've seen what wealth does to families. Mike saw it too. His own siblings sued him when their parents died, fighting over an inheritance. Friends appeared out of nowhere when they found out he was successful. He became paranoid, isolated. But we're family, Margaret said. We wouldn't have done that. You wouldn't have. But would your father? Would Bradley? If they'd known from the beginning that I had money, do you think Gerald would have let us live our quiet life in Scarborough? Or would he have been in our business constantly, trying to influence decisions, form alliances? Margaret was quiet. She knew the answer. And Emma, I turned to my daughter. If you'd grown up knowing you'd inherit hundreds of millions someday, would you have become a nurse? Or would you have coasted, maybe gone into the family business, just because it was expected, never really finding your own path? I don't know, Emma admitted. Probably not nursing. The hours are terrible, and the pay is mediocre. She smiled slightly. But I love it. I love helping people. I love the challenge. Even when it's hard, even when I'm exhausted, I can't imagine doing anything else. That's because you chose it freely, I said. Not because you needed the money or because someone expected it. You chose it because it called to you. That's precious, Emma. That's what I wanted for you. She cried a little. Margaret cried more. We all cried, really, sitting around our old kitchen table with mugs of tea going cold. So what happens now? Emma finally asked. Am I really going to work at Grandpa's company? Only if you want to. The offer is real, but you don't have to take it. You can keep being a nurse, or you can try something new. It's entirely your choice. But you think I should take it. I think you'd be brilliant at it, I said. But yes, it should be because you want to, not because I want you to, or because your grandfather needs you to, or because Bradley doesn't deserve it. Those are all terrible reasons to make a major life change. What are good reasons? Challenge, growth, the opportunity to make a real difference in thousands of people's lives. Whitmore Industries employs over 4,000 people. Those people depend on the company being well run. If you became CEO someday, you'd have the power to shape their working conditions, their benefits, their futures. That's meaningful work. Emma thought about that. Can I take some time to decide? Take all the time you need. Over the next few weeks, things slowly settled into a new normal. Gerald called twice, stiff and formal, to discuss board matters. Bradley avoided us entirely. But Marcus started coming to dinner once a week, regaling us with stories from the business world. Emma did take the VP position. Started in March. Within 6 months, she'd identified inefficiencies in 3 departments and proposed solutions that saved the company over $2 million. Gerald, to his credit, publicly acknowledged her contributions at a board meeting. Bradley, meanwhile, struggled. His performance reviews were mediocre. The executive coach reported that he resisted feedback, blamed others for failures, took credit for his team's successes. By year's end, it was clear he wasn't going to make it to the CEO position. Gerald aged visibly during that year. Watching his son fail, watching his granddaughter succeed, it changed something in him. He started calling me occasionally, not about business, but just to talk, about getting older, about legacy, about regret. "I was wrong about you," he said one day. We were having lunch at his club. "For 39 years, I was wrong." "You weren't entirely wrong," I said. "I was a factory worker. That part was true, but you were so much more than that. And I never bothered to look deeper. Why would you? I didn't give you any reason to. I kept my head down, lived quietly, never made waves. Margaret says you did it on purpose, stayed under the radar. Mike taught me that money is like strong cologne. A little bit, used properly, can be pleasant. Too much, and you drive everyone away." I finished my soup. I didn't want to drive my family away. "Instead, you let me treat you like you were nothing." "I never thought I was nothing," I said. "Your opinion didn't define me, Gerald." "It never did." He was quiet for a long moment. "Bradley's not going to be CEO, is he?" "Probably not." "Emma?" "Maybe. If she wants it, she's still deciding if that's the life she wants. And if she doesn't want it, then you find the best qualified person, family or not. Lead with competence, not sentiment." Gerald nodded slowly. "Mike was a smart man, the smartest person I ever knew. He was lucky to have you as a friend. I was lucky to have him." I met Gerald's eyes. "He taught me that true wealth isn't what you own. It's who loves you, who trusts you, who you become when no one's watching. That's the measure of a life well lived." That conversation marked a turning point. Gerald started treating me like an actual person, asking about my opinions, including me in discussions. It was strange at first, uncomfortable even, but over time, it became genuine. 2 years later, at the board meeting, Emma was promoted to COO. Bradley was moved to a VP position, which he held for 6 months before resigning to start his own consulting firm. Last I heard, it's struggling, but maybe the experience will teach him something. Emma thrived as COO, 3 years in that role, and she transformed operational efficiency, improved employee satisfaction, and increased profitability by 18%. When Gerald finally retired at 79, the board vote for CEO was unanimous. My daughter became CEO of a $2 billion company, not because of family connections, not because of inheritance, but because she earned it. She proved herself capable, hardworking, visionary. At her inauguration as CEO, Emma gave a speech. She talked about values, about integrity, about the responsibility of leadership, and she told a story about her father, who taught her that what you have matters less than what you do with it. Margaret cried. Gerald cried. Even Marcus got a little misty. Me? I felt proud. Not because my daughter was rich and powerful, but because she was kind and capable and had earned everything through her own merit. Because she understood that leadership was about service, not status. That night, Margaret and I sat on our back deck in Scarborough. The same house, the same modest neighborhood. We'd talked about moving over the years, but we liked it here. Liked our neighbors, liked our routines, liked the life we'd built. "Do you regret it?" Margaret asked. "Keeping the secret for so long?" I thought about that. "No. I regret that it hurt you when you found out. But I don't regret the life we lived. Do you?" She leaned her head on my shoulder. "We could have traveled more, seen the world. We still can. We've got time. We could have had a bigger house, nicer cars. We could have. But would we have been happier?" She was quiet for a long moment. "No, I don't think so. I think we would have spent our lives managing wealth instead of living life." That's what Mike understood. That's what he wanted me to understand. Money is a tool, not a destination. Use it wisely, but don't let it use you. He was a good friend. The best. We sat there as the sun set. Two people in their 60s who'd lived a life of contentment disguised as modesty. We'd raised a daughter who knew the value of hard work. We'd built a marriage based on love, not luxury. We'd proven that wealth was meaningless if you had no one to share your life with. That's the lesson I hope people take from my story. It's not about hiding money or living like a pauper when you don't have to. It's about understanding what truly matters. A loving partner, a child who knows their worth isn't tied to a bank account. A simple life lived with purpose and dignity. Gerald understood it by the end. Took him long enough, but he got there. Started a foundation in his retirement, giving away much of his fortune to causes that mattered. Built a relationship with Emma based on mutual respect, not just bloodline. Even reached out to some of the workers he'd dismissed over the years, made amends where he could. Bradley, I'm less sure about. Last Christmas, he showed up at Emma's house, awkward and humble in a way I'd never seen. Apologized for his behavior. Said he'd been in therapy, working on himself. Emma forgave him, because that's who she is. As for me, I'm still just Thomas Sullivan. I still drive my Camry, still live in Scarborough, still have coffee with Marcus on Thursday mornings, though now we also attend board meetings together. The difference is, I don't have to hide anymore. My family knows who I am, all of who I am, and they love me not despite the money or because of it, but simply because I'm me, the man who met a beautiful woman at a charity auction 39 years ago and built a life worth living. Mike would be proud. I know I am. If there's wisdom to take from all this, it's this. Your worth isn't measured by what you own, but by who you are when everything else is stripped away. Build your life on values, not valuables. Invest in relationships, not just portfolios. And never let anyone define you by their narrow understanding of success. Live authentically, love deeply, lead with integrity. The rest is just details.